Well, ladies and gentlemen, strap yourselves in, because it's time for another episode of Boss Economics World, the only show bold enough to call out economic nonsense with the ferocity of a Wall Street bull on a caffeine high. I'm your host, the guy who's been warning you about government mismanagement since the days of dial-up internet, and today, we've got a doozy of a story. It's hotter than a crypto scam in a bull market, juicier than a leveraged buyout, and more chaotic than a central banker trying to explain inflation to a toddler. We're talking about Donald Trump's triumphant return to the White House, his tariff tantrum, and how it's turned the U.S. economy into a piñata at a toddler's birthday party, everyone swinging, but the candy's nowhere to be found. Now, before we dive into the deep end of this economic dumpster fire, let me remind you of our mission here at Boss Economics World. We're here to satire the stupidity, criticize the cluelessness, and shine a spotlight on the government's uncanny ability to take a functioning economy and yeet it into the abyss. And oh boy, does Trump's second term give us plenty of material to work with. So, grab your popcorn, mute your boss's Zoom call, and let's break down this mess from the surface to the core, point by point, data by data, and jab by sarcastic jab. Let's start with the surface-level clownery, shall we? Donald Trump, the self-proclaimed economic messiah, swept into office in January 2025, declaring his presidency the greatest start ever. Really, Don? Greatest start ever? I mean, I get it, hyperbole is your brand, but let's check the tape. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA, the U.S. economy shrank in the first quarter of 2025, negative GDP growth for the first time in 3 years. And why? Oh, just a little thing called surging imports as corporate America tripped over itself to front-run Trump's tariffs. You know, those brilliant import taxes he loves so much, the ones he claims will fix trade imbalances and bring back manufacturing. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Instead, they gave us a trade deficit ballooning to record levels, with the U.S. Census Bureau reporting a goods trade gap of $103.1 billion in March 2025 alone, up 20% from the same time last year. But wait, Trump's got a defense. He's out there on Truth Social, shouting in all caps, "Great job numbers, far better than expected." It's already working. Oh, bless his heart. Sure, the U.S. added 456,000 jobs in the first 3 months of 2025, which sounds solid, until you realize that's barely keeping pace with population growth, and the unemployment rate ticked up to 4.2%, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS. And here's the kicker, the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index plummeted to 89.1 in April 2025, the lowest since the post-COVID recovery, with Americans increasingly worried about future job losses. Why? Because Trump's tariffs are like a slow-motion car crash, everyone sees the wreckage coming, but no one can stop it. Now, let's peel back the layers of this economic onion and get to the real meat of the madness, Trump's tariff obsession. This guy loves tariffs more than Kanye loves Kanye, and he's not shy about it. He's slapped the highest protectionist barriers on U.S. imports since the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, yes, the same act that economists widely blame for deepening the Great Depression. Coincidence? I think not. Trump's April 2, 2025, announcement of reciprocal duties sent shockwaves through global markets, with Bloomberg Economics Global Trade Uncertainty Index spiking to levels unseen since his first-term trade war with China. And just when you thought it couldn't get worse, Trump started flip-flopping, putting some tariffs on hold, threatening others, and leaving businesses, consumers, and trading partners in a state of perpetual whiplash. The result? Pure, unadulterated chaos. Companies like Walmart and Target, which rely heavily on imported goods, saw their stock prices crater by 15% and 12%, respectively, in the week following the tariff announcement, per Yahoo Finance. Meanwhile, the US dollar slid 7% against a basket of major currencies in the first 100 days of Trump's term, the worst performance at this stage of any recent presidency, according to Federal Reserve data. Why? Because investors are running for the hills, folks. They see a trade war brewing, and they're not sticking around to see how many punches the U.S. economy can take before it hits the mat. And let's talk about the trade deficit, shall we? Trump's whole tariff shtick is based on the idea that America is getting ripped off by its trading partners, and tariffs will magically fix the trade imbalance. But here's the reality, straight from the U.S. Census Bureau, the trade deficit widened by 25% in the first quarter of 2025, hitting an all-time record. Why? Because companies rushed to import goods before the tariffs kicked in, creating a front-loading effect that made the deficit look like a kid who found a candy jar. So, instead of fixing the trade imbalance, Trump's tariffs made it worse. Congratulations, Mr. President, you played yourself. Now, let's get to the core of this economic catastrophe, the part where Trump's policies threaten to push the U.S. into a full-blown recession. First up, inflation. Remember how Trump campaigned on taming the Biden inflation monster? Well, the headline inflation rate did cool to 2.1% in March 2025, matching the lowest since early 2021, per the BLS. But don't pop the champagne just yet, because the soft data tells a very different story. Surveys from the University of Michigan show consumer inflation expectations for the next year jumping to 4.5%, the highest since 2011, and long-term expectations hitting 3.8%. Why? Because tariffs are the ultimate inflationary boogeyman, folks. They jack up the price of imported goods, which then ripples through the economy, raising the cost of everything from iPhones to IKEA furniture. And it's not just consumers who are sweating, businesses are too. The National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, reported in April 2025 that small business optimism, which soared after Trump's election, has now crashed to its lowest level since 2012. Why? Because tariffs hit small businesses hardest, they don't have the deep pockets of multinational corporations to absorb the costs. Add to that the uncertainty around Trump's tax cuts and deregulation promises, which are stuck in congressional limbo, and you've got a recipe for investment paralysis. According to the BEA, business investment in equipment grew in Q1 2025, but new orders for non-defense capital goods excluding aircraft, a key indicator of future investment, dropped by 3.2% in March 2025, per the Census Bureau. Translation: companies are battening down the hatches, not building for the future. Oh, and let's not forget the labor market. Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration, complete with the biggest mass deportation in U.S. history, has slashed border crossings to near zero, per U.S. Customs and Border Protection data. Sounds like a win, right? Wrong. Immigrants, both legal and illegal, have been a key driver of U.S. workforce growth, especially in sectors like construction, agriculture, and hospitality. With the labor force shrinking, Goldman Sachs estimates that GDP growth could be shaved by 0.5% annually over the next 2 years, just as tariffs are slowing the economy. Talk about a double whammy. So, where does all this leave us? According to the latest Bloomberg survey of economists, the risk of a U.S. recession in the next 12 months has jumped to 45%, up from 30% just a month ago. And who do we have to thank for this delightful turn of events? Why, the government, of course. Trump's chaotic tariff rollout, his flip-flopping on policy, and his obsession with short-term wins over long-term stability have turned the U.S. economy into a house of cards in a windstorm. And let's not forget Congress, which can't seem to agree on a tax bill, a budget, or even what day it is, leaving businesses and consumers in a state of perpetual uncertainty. But hey, at least the stock market is having a good time, right? Oh, wait, scratch that. The S&P 500 is down 10% since Trump took office, the worst 100-day performance of any recent presidency, per Bloomberg data. And those Treasury yields? They spiked to 4.6% after the tariff announcement, signaling a crisis of confidence in U.S. assets, before retreating to 4.1%, still uncomfortably high, folks. Meanwhile, consumer confidence in government economic policy has hit an all-time low, with Gallup reporting in April 2025 that 65% of Americans disapprove of Trump's economic stewardship, including a shocking 20% of Republicans. Ouch. So, there you have it, folks, Donald Trump's second term is off to a start that's less, greatest ever, and more, greatest disaster. From tariffs that backfire to trade deficits that balloon, from inflation fears that soar to investment plans that stall, this administration is proving once again that government mismanagement is the fastest way to tank an economy. And let's be real, this isn't just Trump's fault. It's the fault of a political system that prioritizes soundbites over solutions, grandstanding over governance, and ideology over evidence. Here at Boss Economics World, we'll keep calling it like we see it, because someone has to. So, to our viewers, whether you're a finance pro crunching numbers or a regular Joe worried about your grocery bill, remember this, the economy isn't some mysterious beast. It's a machine, and right now, the government is the drunk mechanic trying to fix it with a sledgehammer. Stay sharp, stay skeptical, and we'll see you next time, unless we're all bartering canned goods in a tariff-induced recession, that is.